Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 40 more.
It was the crime of the century, a horrifying and gruesome double murder that, after more than 100 years, is still unsolved.
Mr. Borden and his wife were brutally hatcheted to death early in the morning.
These two victims were butchered.
Join us at the house where it all happened. One of the most haunted locations in the world.
There's a residual energy that's here.
Footsteps, people talking, doors slamming.
A lot of people see the toys being moved around.
There's a man there, and I don't know who he is.
It is about the right size for most of the wounds on the Borden skulls.
Our experts will break down the murders and the trial. They'll discuss alternate theories and potentially overlooked suspects.
Uncle John's alibi doesn't hold water.
Join host Susan Slaughter and your favorite paranormal researchers as they search for answers to the crime and the haunting. Will the ghost of the house offer any clues? Will Lizzie herself make contact? Find out as the Dark Zone brings you the Lizzie Borden Murder House.
Joining us from Fall River, Massachusetts at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. You know her from her shows, Ghost Hunters Academy, where she and I met, Ghost Hunters International, and her current show, Paranormal Caught on Camera. We have Susan Slaughter.
I am currently standing in the kitchen. I didn't know if you guys wanted to see a little bit of like how amazing it looks in here. We have a working stove. I've eaten breakfast made by this crazy thing right here. I'm so excited.
We wanna start and dive right into this, and we want to roll a package for you guys that we put together about the house and about the events that took place there 128 years ago.
We are currently in the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast Museum. It was built in 1845, and it looks almost identical to how it did when the Bordens were here. You can literally walk through our house and touch what the Bordens touched. One of the cool things is Mr. Borden actually started off his career in carpentry and apprenticed under Southern Miller, the man who built this house. So it is possible that Mr. Borden even had a hand in building this very house.
On the morning of August 4th, 1892, the city of Fall River, Massachusetts was the site of a grisly double murder. Andrew Borden, a prominent local businessman, and his second wife, Abby, were found hacked to death. Abby Borden had been killed by approximately 19 blows from a hatchet or some other kind of sharp implement.
One like grazed her nose, so someone came at her, and then she turned to run. So she had to have known who it was because they got close enough to swing an axe.
About an hour and a half later, Mr. Borden had been killed on a sitting room sofa.
Andrew Borden was hit 11 times in his face from behind. He didn't have any defensive wounds, so most likely he was asleep.
One early witness described his face as resembling raw meat.
The bodies were found at different times, and Lizzie was the one who found her father's body, and the nosy neighbor next door, Mrs. Churchill, and the maid found Mrs. Borden's body.
These two victims were butchered.
The immediate assumption was that it must have been the work of a madman.
So there was quite a few suspects, Lizzie included, but everyone did seem to have alibis. The sister was visiting friends in Fairhaven. The uncle seemed to have a rock-solid alibi. Mr. Borden wasn't in the house when his wife was killed, and the maid was outside washing windows or upstairs lying down for both the murders. The only person who really put themselves on the property at the time, besides the maid, was Lizzie.
The program that we're going to be presenting you guys is kind of a hybrid of a true crime discussion and a paranormal discussion, right? So what we're starting off here with is we're starting off with the establishment of what happened 128 years ago. So I'm going to toss it off to Susan, and Susan, introduce us to Danielle.
Okay, well, Jay, this is Danielle Cabral. She is one of the beloved tour guides here at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. And I'm just going to swing it over to her because she's such a wealth of knowledge on this place. And we asked to start the tour here in the kitchen, but I'm sure as this progresses, it's just going to get even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kitchen is kind of key for the whole Lizzie Borden story because this is where Lizzie was seen burning a dress 3 days after the murders occurred. The door that you see there now is actually our pantry. It used to be the Borden's coal closet. So on Sunday after the murders, Lizzie goes into that closet, pulls out a dress, holds it up and says out loud to her sister, who is right behind us here, says, "This whole thing is covered in paint, I'm gonna burn it." And Emma says, "Oh yeah, you should, why don't you?" Something like that. So Lizzie ended up burning the dress right here in the stove, but her friend Alice Russell, who ended up being her turncoat friend, as we call her, threw her right under the bus in court because she told her not to burn the dress, and she did anyway.
Which already kind of pegs her in a suspicious light. Because as this progresses, I don't really know too much about it, but I know that they were looking for this dress, right?
Right.
Detectives were looking for this dress.
Yes.
Okay.
So Lizzie knew the police were looking for a dress, and by this point in time when she had burned it, the house had already been searched twice, and they never found a dress. And Lizzie said it was covered in paint, and back then there was no garbage. So if you couldn't burn something, you bury it. So a dress is very easy to burn. It is kind of suspicious it happened right after the murders, but what if it was just a dress covered with paint?
That's true. And I want to keep my mind and, theories open because this is the very first day,
Right.
So I can't start pegging anybody for this crime just yet. So what else can we do? Like, I'm going to follow you now on your tour, and you just, tell me what you know.
All right, so the murders happened August 4th, 1892. Mr. Borden was killed. His wife, Mrs. Borden, was killed. Lizzie was one of the main suspects, but they also were suspicious of the maid, Bridget Sullivan, who worked for them for 2 years and 9 months. Uncle John Vinica Morse, he was a suspect as well. And I will tell you about their alibis, but I want to take up into the rooms to do that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that once we get to where the people were actually killed. So this is the sitting room. This is where Mr. Borden was killed. And that, of course, is the infamous couch. Now, at the time Mr. Borden was killed, everyone seems to have their alibis. Lizzie said that her father had come home and sat down on the sofa to take a nap. So she even sat and watched him take off his shoes, put in his house slippers, then she went outside to the barn. Right before she did that, the maid said she wasn't feeling well. And just to give you a little bit of background on that, the whole family actually got sick before the murders occurred. They had mutton and broth for 3 days. Now, we put our food in the fridge, so it's fine, but they're sat on the stove in the middle of a heat wave. So as you can imagine, none of them were feeling great. So Bridget goes upstairs to lie down. The whole family doesn't know this as far as we can tell. Mrs. Borden is already dead upstairs. Now, Uncle John had left the house early that morning. Emma, she's been away for almost 2 weeks in Fairhaven, Mass, visiting some friends, so she was away for all of it. But Lizzie says her father sits down on the sofa to take a nap. She goes out to the barn looking for lead. There was a fishing trip to Marion, Mass coming on Monday, and she wanted to make some sinkers. So she looks for a little while, goes up into the loft, and eats pears. When she came back down, she entered back through the side door. And the door that we just came through from the kitchen was always kept closed. So Lizzie had to go through the dining room and around the corner here. That's when she found her father's body. Mr. Borden, he got 10 to 11 blows to the side of the head and face. One blow was so severe it cut his eye socket in half and left his eyeball on his cheek. Another blow almost severed his nose from his face.
And is this the original couch that he was murdered on?
No, not the original. The original, when they took the original couch, they had it in court as evidence. Then it was reupholstered and it was brought back here. So Emma was in the house with the original couch until they moved out. We don't know what happened to it after that. Perhaps it was destroyed, or maybe it's in someone's house right now. They don't even know it.
I know. Oh my gosh.
But I do want to talk about the hatchet to the right there. So this was found in a box on a shelf in the basement, and what drew officers' attention to it was a fresh break in the handle. But it was also covered with ash. So when they looked at it closer, they thought they saw blood and hair, but once it was analyzed, the blood turned out to be rust and the hair was animal. So that was never proven to be the murder weapon, and no murder weapon was ever found. This is why, well, one of the reasons why Lizzie was acquitted so quickly. By the time the trial ended, which lasted for 13 days, they had no murder weapon, they couldn't prove motive, and they had no bloody clothes.
So, and they don't have the forensics that we do today where we can like peg on DNA and fingerprints and things like that. So you can literally get away with murder.
Because the only thing they could differentiate for blood was animal and human. That was it. There was no fingerprinting or anything like you just said, so pretty easy. So that picture is Lizzie. That's the most famous picture of her. That was taken 2 days after her acquittal. So Lizzie was told she was a murder suspect in the front parlor there. When she was arrested, it was on August 11th, and then she had to be held in Taunton jail because Fall River had no facilities for a woman. And back then, there was no bail for murder. So she had to await the trial in jail for 10 months. Trial lasted 13 days, and she's acquitted in an hour. So that picture is Lizzie. That's the most famous picture of her. That was taken 2 days after her acquittal. After Lizzie finds her father's body, I mean, chaos ensues. So she runs to the back stairs and she yells for the maid, screaming, "Come quick, father is dead, someone came in and killed him." So Bridget runs downstairs and goes right across the street to the doctor where the courthouse stands now. The doctor wasn't home though. So Bridget comes back and then Lizzie sends her out again to go get Alice Russell. She was a friend of the girls for a long time. Meanwhile, we have Mrs. Churchill. So she was the busybody who lived right on the other side of the driveway. She said she just happened to look out her kitchen window when she saw Lizzie in the screen door. She said Lizzie looked pale and distressed according to her testimony, so she called out to her. She said, "What happened?" Lizzie called back and said, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, please do come over. Someone has killed father." So Mrs. Churchill came to the house, but she never saw the body of Mr. Borden. So at this point in time, Lizzie has mentioned a few times, "I thought I heard her come in a minute ago. I thought I heard her come in, go upstairs. I wish somebody would go find her." Well, the last point, she kind of looked at Bridget. And Bridget, I mean, she was petrified. I don't blame her. Her employer has been brutally hacked to death.
Yeah.
The killer could possibly still be in the house. So Mrs. Churchill, the busybody, volunteered to go with Bridget. And if you follow me, I'll show you exactly how they found her body.
Okay.
All right. So this is where Mrs. Borden was killed. The last people to see Mrs. Borden alive was Lizzie and the maid. She was up here in the guest bedroom making the bed for Uncle John because this is one that he slept in. So Mrs. Borden goes downstairs that morning around 9 to get pillowcases. She said she forgot. Lizzie and the maid both see her. She comes back upstairs. That's the last time she was ever seen alive. Now, she was attacked on the side of the bed here. The interesting thing is, whoever came into the room, she saw. Hopefully Mr. Borden never saw his attacker, but she definitely did because there's no other way to get in here. So a question I always have is, did she know her killer? Was she not afraid of them? Because there doesn't show to be any signs of a struggle. She had no defensive wounds. I'm a big believer in it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So I can't prove to you without a doubt what the first blow was. But she does get a blow here, which kind of looks like she was standing up and facing her attacker, but that wouldn't make any sense if it wasn't the first blow.
Right.
So she does receive another blow 4 inches deep in between both of her shoulder blades, and then a remaining 17 blows to the back of her head and neck for a total of 19. But just like for Mr. Borden, everyone has their alibis when Mrs. Borden is killed as well. Lizzie even put herself in the house when Mrs. Borden was murdered. She said she was in the dining room ironing some handkerchiefs. The maid was on the south side of the house washing windows. Mr. Borden was out around town doing his normal business routine, and the uncle had gone to visit his niece. So he stopped at the post office, then went to his niece's house on Bosses Street. He even took a trolley ride back. What's really interesting about Uncle John is that we can kind of blow a big hole in his alibi.
Okay, tell me about that.
Okay, so when he gets back to the house between like 11:30 and 11:45, Mr. Borden has been found and Mrs. Borden's body has been discovered. By this point in time, the police all show up, but it was mostly rookies because most of the police force was at an annual event at Rocky Point. So what better day to commit a murder than when the entire police force isn't even in the state? So it's mostly rookies that show up. They're deputizing civilians. There's a whole bunch of reporters here because the cops weren't the first call. The cops were the third. The little boy who called the police called the papers first.
Oh, man.
And he got paid for the story. So there's quite a few people outside the front of this house. When Uncle John gets dropped off and walks up 2nd Street, you can imagine he sees the people. But he just goes into the backyard and grabs pears. Then he comes back around to the side door and talks to an officer. So the officer had asked him what he saw when he got home. And Uncle John said, "I saw nothing that attracted my attention." They said, "You saw nothing out of the way?" He said, "I saw nothing that attracted my attention at all." So they went back and checked on his alibi. They found that he was at the post office, he was at his niece's house, and the trolley ride that he took back, he memorized all 6 priests on it. their first names, their last names, the trolley driver's cap number, the trolley number itself. They find all 6 priests. They corroborate his story. That in and of itself is mind-blowing, because if you think about the dynamic of the 1800s, the English and the Irish didn't get along. There was even signs on storefronts here that said Irish need not apply, no Irish allowed. So the fact that an English Protestant gentleman struck up a conversation with 6 priests is strange. What's even stranger is all the priests vouched for Uncle John.
Yeah.
But a reporter didn't buy it. And he went to Weybosset Street the next day and he asked Uncle John's niece, how do you know when he left? She said, well, it must have been around 11:20. He said, how do you know? She said, well, the doctor had come over to tend to my daughter who wasn't feeling well, and the doctor and Uncle John never saw each other.
Okay.
So the doctor's here at 11:20. So there's no way he's at Weybosset Street at 11:20. So that means Uncle John had to have left Weybosset Street closer to 10:30. Now that doesn't mean he was here. All that means very simply is that we can no longer put him anywhere for an hour. A journalist, the same one who did the story, published it in the newspaper, so the cops had to have seen that.
Yeah.
But they didn't do anything about it. They were just like, okay, he's not a suspect.
Wow.
Yeah, come take a look at these pictures here. So these are the crime scene photos. So in this picture here, it looks a little strange, like she's on her knees or her rear end is just up in the air. Either in the struggle, like when she fell, or when she was actually being hit by the hatchet, her
Right.
dress and petticoat got bunched up. So around her rear end here, this is just her petticoat. As a woman back then, you couldn't show any part of your leg. It was inappropriate. So an officer came over and tucked her dress underneath her ankles out of respect. They weren't worried about contaminating a crime scene. They
Right.
wanted to preserve her modesty. So that's what you see there.
Okay.
This picture, you can see she's lying flat on her stomach. You can see the pool of blood around her head.
Yes. And you can also see reflected in the mirror that old camera.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's really amazing.
So the reason that the blood was so important was because it was coagulated. So between that and the stomach contents from the autopsy, that's how they determined that she had died an hour and a half before her husband did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One fun fact about the crime scene photos, as far as we know, were the first crime scene photos that were taken in the United States.
That's a piece of criminal history there.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
A little morbidly fun fact.
Yeah.
So what would you like to know next? I mean, do you want to talk about the autopsies? Do you want to talk about...
So yeah, actually the autopsies, and we kind of skipped over it. It was downstairs. I heard that the autopsies were actually held in the home. Is that true?
Right.
So where exactly was that held in the home?
So Mrs. Borden's was done in the dining room, and Mr. Borden's was done in the sitting room where he was killed. We do have, like, autopsy boards in the dining room. They're not from the Bordens, they're just period correct.
Right.
But they did autopsies because they were trying to search for poison. So both of the stomachs were removed from the victims and they were shipped to Harvard Medical School. But it was said that no poison was found.
So you're saying there was kind of this theory because everyone got sick from eating old mutton that they're like, well, possibly this was like supposed to be an assassination of a whole family and that went awry, and then they had to use like a hatchet to kind of finish off the matriarch and patriarchs before real stuff started going down. So I mean, I see that theory running through, but then the autopsy shows there was no poison.
But let's be very blunt. It's 1892. What are they going to do to search for poison? They really can't test any chemicals or anything like that. So the only thing they can do is see if the stomach's been eroded, and it wasn't. And if it was anything like cyanide, which is what Lizzie tried to buy before the murders occurred, even though she was denied.
Okay.
So it was right before the murders happened, she went to a pharmacy. Eli Benson is a pharmacist, and he asked her what she wants. She said, I'd like 10 cents worth of prussic acid. Clean moths out of a sealskin cape. So it's kind of like an insecticide that they would use. But you can't buy it at a pharmacy unless you have a doctor's prescription. That's exactly what Eli Benz told her. She tells him that she had gotten it there before, and he said, my dear lady, not by me. So she never got the poison. But it wasn't just because of that they tried to search for poison in the bodies. Mrs. Borden, before the murders happened, went to the doctor and said, my God, we've been poisoned. She said, we've been all violently ill the night before, fits of vomiting, and there was nothing unusual on the dining room table. So I guess her thought was, with the milk and bread being delivered outside, that maybe someone tampered with it, the family had been poisoned. But the doctor said, you're not being poisoned, you're suffering from the summer illness, which is food poisoning. So I guess my question to you would be, what would cause her to be so fearful that they're being poisoned and not, oh, hey, we're just sick, like we always get in the summertime? Because I know that Mr. Borden, so when he started off, he didn't have a lot of money. His father squandered a lot of money away. He vowed to make back every penny his father lost, and boy, did he. He started very humbly as a carpenter, and he apprenticed under Souther Miller. So we do believe Mr. Borden had a hand in building this house, which is kind of neat. Eventually, he goes into banking and real estate. He's worth $350,000 by the time he died, which would be around $12 million on the high end today.
All right.
So he was definitely comfortable. But you don't get wealthy from being broke without creating a few enemies in town. So did he create enough enemies to the point where Mrs. Borden thought maybe someone's trying to kill us? But from here, I'll take you into Mr. and Mrs. Borden's bedroom.
Okay.
A year before the murders, the house gets broken into in broad daylight. Now, Lizzie, Emma, and the maid are all home, but they never saw or heard a thing. And the only items that were stolen from the house were Mr. and Mrs. Borden's things from the room over here.
Okay.
But one of the things that was stolen was Mrs. Borden's jewelry, and it was actually jewelry that she had from her mother. So it was a very sentimental piece.
Like heirlooms.
Exactly. Nothing else in the house was disturbed. So Mr. Borden, he calls in the marshal to investigate. 2 weeks later, calls it off. Nothing is found. So he puts a lock on his bedroom door, held the only key, and it's on the mantle in plain sight on the first floor.
So that sounds like somebody might have known exactly where to go to get certain objects.
It kind of does sound like that, because to have 3 people rolling around the house and not notice anybody, that just sounds strange. But then again, there's an hour and a half between both of the murders. So if it wasn't an inside job, a person or persons ran around this house and were never seen. All right, so I'm going to take you up to the 3rd floor so you can see Bridget's room.
Okay.
Because there's a really cool door up there that I want to show you.
And I know you keep mentioning Bridget, but I've seen in movies that the character of the maid had a different name.
Yes. So when Bridget came over from Ireland, she lost some of her paperwork, and she couldn't quite remember how old she was. So she just kind of guessed. So at the time the murders occurred, she said she was around 26 years old. The reason why you hear the other name Maggie is because it was like a slur for Irish immigrants. Mr. and Mrs. Borden always called her Bridget, but Lizzie and Emma addressed her as Maggie. And if you go back through the court system, you'll see she's addressed as Maggie as well. I just prefer to call her by her real name because I think Maggie is a little insensitive. So the door here, original door to the house. You can really touch what Bridget touched, which I think is fantastic. But from the landing where we're standing to the west side of the house, it was all just storage when the Bordens lived here. But Bridget's room was in here, if you want to take a look. Now, one interesting thing about her, when the murders occurred and she had to be detained for questioning for the trial, she testified for the prosecution, but she never incriminated anyone. Then she disappears. So rumors started to fly. Lizzie paid her off to go back home to Ireland and keep her mouth shut, but the rumors never proved to be true. So out of curiosity, some of us who work here now went back to the census to try to find her, but we couldn't. The census only happens once every 10 years, and a lot of paperwork from that time was all destroyed in fires. We finally tracked her down, though. We found her in Anaconda, Montana in 1898, and I know that sounds really strange, but Irish immigrants tended to move west to farm. So she moves out there to farm. She meets a Jonathan Sullivan in 1905, never had kids, never spoke about what happened in the house today to anyone, not even to her husband.
Okay.
So obviously something was said to her family because her great niece came here quite a few years ago. Wanted to see where her aunt worked, which in and of itself was really, really cool. But Bridget herself passed away in 1948. She was 82 years old. She outlived Lizzie and Emma by 21 years.
Wow.
So if she knew anything, I mean, she kept her silence.
Yeah, she took it to the grave.
Yeah. But the 2 pictures next to the windows there, or next to the window, that was given to us by her family. We were the first to release these pictures to the public. And the family told us that her nickname was Bridgie. And she was a really strict aunt. Which she really looks like it from the story, from the picture.
Yeah. She was like, the last girls I lived with needed some discipline, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So
man.
I do want to talk about one more story up here that isn't directly related to the Bordens, but it is related to the 3rd floor.
Okay.
So during the trial, they were trying to see if anyone in Lizzie's bloodline had any mental illness, because they thought that maybe if she did it, she was just mentally unstable. So they ended up finding Mr. Borden's uncle Ladwick's wife. So they used to live right on the other side of this house here. The yellow house still stands. Mr. Borden's uncle Ladwick was married to Eliza. They had 3 small kids. In 1848, the story is Eliza had such severe postpartum depression, she tried drowning all of her children in the well.
Oh, wow.
And she was successful with the 2 smallest ones. Their names were Eliza and Holden. The same day, the older daughter, Maria, climbed out. She was able to save herself. Then the mother goes into the basement and takes a straight razor to her own throat. So the story in and of itself is terrible. But because it was a relation by marriage, they ruled out that Lizzie had any mental issues going on in the family.
Right.
But we do still see the kids here. So I just wanted to point that out because we do call the room all the way down straight ahead the Jose and Knowlton room. We also call it the children's room.
I see.
So if you take a peek in there, you'll see a whole bunch of toys, and that's for the kids.
Okay, and have there been reports of sightings of little children ghosts here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can hear kids running across the 3rd floor. The lamps turn on sometimes. Any equipment that you use that has lights or makes sound usually always draws their attention.
Yeah, and I heard that after all of this was acquitted, that the jury sent a photo of themselves, right?
Yeah.
To Lizzie.
So they took a picture, they all signed it, and they sent it to Lizzie and Emma as a gift. And they put it in their front parlor until they moved out.
Wow.
There's a similar picture in the front parlor now. It's just not signed.
It's just not signed.
Right.
Where would all the original photos be? And I know you have replicas of the skulls of the Bordens, but are the original skulls here in Massachusetts as well, and the original pictures? And, you know, I know you have like the famous Lizzie Borden picture. Where are all the originals located?
So all the documentation that we have access to over the years comes straight from the Fall River Historical Society. They have stuff from her jail. They have Mr. and Mrs. Borden's hair, I believe, her hairpiece, thing of Mr. Borden's hair, a whole bunch of original documents from Lizzie writing to her friends and things like that. So that in of itself is really fascinating. The skulls technically are still in Massachusetts. They're buried 2 and 3 feet above the bodies.
Why was that?
So when they searched for poison and they couldn't find any when they did the autopsies, a week later they decided to do a second one. As of this point, Lizzie and Emma thought their father and stepmother had been buried. They weren't. They were decapitated in one of the holding vaults at Oak Grove Cemetery. You can still see the holding vault today as soon as you walk in. So Dr. Dolan, the head medical examiner, no pun intended, took them home with him into his basement where he boiled the flesh off and then shipped them to Harvard Medical School. When the trial started, Mr. Borden's skull was brought into court as evidence. They wanted to fit the hatchet into the wounds. Well, Lizzie sees it, she passes out, and so does one of the jurors. But everyone said that Lizzie was trying to play it up for the jury. So the skulls were used in court as evidence, and they were kept for a long time. They weren't buried for years and years later.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go through the timeline. The afternoon before that fateful day, August 3rd, 1892, 2 p.m., Uncle John Morris arrives to discuss business and spends the night. The following morning, at 7 a.m., Uncle John Morris, Andrew Borden, and Abby Borden have breakfast. At 8:40 a.m., Uncle John Morris leaves the house and stops at the post office. At 8:45 a.m., Lizzie enters the kitchen also to have breakfast. At 9 a.m., Andrew Borden leaves to attend business, and Abby Borden goes upstairs to the guest room to clean. At 9:20 a.m., the maid, Bridget Sullivan, starts washing the south side windows. At 9:30 a.m., Uncle John Morris arrives at number 4 Waybosset to visit relatives. At 9:30 a.m., Abby Borden is murdered in the guest room. A half hour later, at 10 a.m., Bridget is seen washing the northeast windows. A half hour after that, Bridget has come back inside the house to wash the interior windows. 10 minutes later, at 10:40 a.m., Andrew Borden returns home. Bridget lets him in. Lizzie descends the stairs to greet her father. 15 minutes later, at 10:55 a.m., Bridget Sullivan goes upstairs to nap. Andrew rests on the sitting room couch. Lizzie irons handkerchiefs in the dining room. Just 5 minutes later, at 11 a.m., Andrew Borden is murdered. Lizzie calls to Bridget, "Someone has killed Father." Immediately thereafter, Lizzie sends Bridget to get Dr. Bowen. Bridget reports that Dr. Bowen is not home. Lizzie sends Bridget to get their neighbor, Alice Russell. Then, their neighbor, Adelaide Churchill, sees a distressed Lizzie who says, "Someone has killed Father." And 1 minute after that, at 11:15 a.m., police are called and head over to the house. At 11:20 a.m., Dr. Bowen arrives at the house. Nearby, and at the same time, Uncle John Morris leaves his relative's home. It's now 11:30, and Lizzie asks Bridget to check on Abby Borden. Bridget and Adelaide Churchill discover Abby Borden's body. 1 hour later, Uncle John Morris arrives back at the Borden residence. So, you know, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other things that happen at this point. You know, the cops are there, they start their investigation, they start talking to Lizzie. But in terms of, you know, these homicides and, you know, the main players here, these are the official records. This is the official testimony of how things went down. Our next guest is an investigator. He's actually one of the lucky few who've been able to handle the evidence himself in his hands. This is Thomas Mariello. I hope I'm saying Thomas's name correctly. Hello,
Absolutely.
Thomas. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I want to introduce you to Susan Slaughter. She is hosting from the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. She's there.
Hi, Thomas.
Susan.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
So we've got where we left off on the timeline is that the bodies have been discovered, right? So how should this investigation have moved forward? What went wrong with it? What went right with it? Thomas, I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Well, as soon as the police responded to that house and saw that they had one and then two bodies, that's when everybody should have been removed from the house. You know, it's the job of the police to kind of stop time and remove everybody that could manipulate evidence, take evidence, whatever. They needed to be removed from the house. That never happened. I mean, people kept going in and out. Different police officers were coming in, some from the state police, some from the Fall River police, and nobody was in charge for a while. And that certainly was the beginning of the downfall of the investigation. I mean, I could go on for hours.
Yeah,
so
I even heard that officers came in at one point and even moved Abby Borden's clothing and her posture to make her seem more modest before any of the original photos were taken at the crime scene.
The police, when they realized from the trauma to the two bodies that some type of sharp object was used, they started going through the house, which was a good thing. But again, the house is still full of people, and they found several hatchets and axes in the basement. They collected them, but they left them there, and they walked away. They left them. They didn't take them. It wasn't until another day or two that they decided, hey, we better get those axes.
You know, when we think about it from today's perspective, we think, wow, what a brutal murder. What a, you know, somebody took an axe. An axe murder is like, that's what the you know, the crazy maniac in the woods uses, the guy that's got the hook for a hand. But it's interesting that an axe or a hatchet was as common in a household as a pair of scissors, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the basement, that's where they used to kill the chickens, and pull their feathers off for dinner. You know, there was when I was in the basement and we were using luminol to look for various blood spattering and all that kind of stuff. Everything lit up down there because that's where they used to kill animals that they used to eat. And, you know, they used axes and those things. You know, that was one of the mainstay tools that even women used. Even women used.
You've made a point that there wasn't a whole lot of blood, especially on the suspect. Let's talk about Lizzie as a suspect here.
Okay. Well, first of all, we have two bodies. The mother, we believe, died somewhere around 1915. And whoever did this had plenty of time between that murder and the next one to change and clean up, etc. The second one, there wasn't a lot of time because we know what time the father came in, and it was within a 10-15 minute period that Lizzie yelled out, "Somebody killed father." So the question is, if in fact it was Lizzie who did this, how did she not have a lot of blood on her? Because there was no question there was a lot of blood spatter against the wall. When I went through and looked at the evidence and the location, etc., first of all, we need to understand that the father did not see the blows coming. A lot of the documentaries done, you know, has his eyes opening up as the axe is falling. If you look at the crime scene photograph, you know, there was no question that he was probably sleeping because of the way his body is relaxed. It appears that the attack came from behind. Now, they found the father's coat. It was crazy. It's August. It's a hot summer, and everybody during that period of time wore a lot of heavy clothes. I don't understand that. And I'm from Massachusetts, so I know how it is in August. But for some reason, he had taken his coat off, and they found it rolled up underneath his head. Now, why would he have taken his coat off and put it and laid on it? It doesn't make sense. My opinion is, and this is just a theory, that whoever did this, okay, was behind the wall between where the father was and the dining room. That's that wall, and that opening is right where his head was. So somebody could easily have been standing behind that wall, had the wall, the walls protecting them. They could have taken his coat, wrapped his coat around their right arm, the arm they were going to use to attack him. And as they were hitting him 11 times, I believe it was, any blood that was coming back towards where the victim was either hitting the wall, and there was a lot of blood spatter on the wall based on the accounts, and would be going all the way up the person's arm. Well, if they used the coat, all the blood would have been on the coat. They could have taken it off, put it underneath his head. He was still bleeding. They wouldn't have known the difference. So, in my opinion, that would be one way to eliminate a lot of blood that would have hit the attacker.
When you say the attacker, do you have an opinion on who the attacker was?
When I work for the defense, they always want me to give them opinion on whether their client is guilty or not guilty. And I never give an opinion, because as soon as I have an opinion, I lose my objectivity, and then I become biased. But in this case, this is a very cold case in the 1800s, so I'm very comfortable with saying that Lizzie Borden committed these two murders. Again, it's my opinion based on my knowledge. It's just kind of like saying, did O.J. Simpson kill his ex-wife and Ron Goldman? He was found not guilty, but that doesn't mean he didn't do it. Again, our criminal justice system is not looking to see who committed the crime or not. They're looking to see if you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt and convince 12 people who weren't smart enough to get out of jury duty what the outcome may be. So in that case, like when they decapitated the two heads and presented it to the jury, that was kind of like the same thing with the gloves, having O.J. Simpson to put the gloves on. It was a mistake. They tried to tell the jury, look at this, look at what they did, look what she did to her parents. And the reality is the jury didn't believe a woman had enough strength and capability to do that, which, in my opinion, is a mistake. Because whoever did this had significant rage. It's one thing to kill somebody with an axe, but when you do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that's more than just trying to kill somebody. You've got significant rage that comes from somewhere. So the key is, who would have that rage and for what reason? And that's a significant question.
I do have a question for you, Thomas. Do you think she was capable of killing two people, or do you think she had an accomplice?
I don't think she had an accomplice at all. And based on the fact that we believe that she was looking for poison the day before, the only reason why the jury didn't hear that evidence is because during the inquest, the mayor of the town told Lizzie that she was under suspicion. And at that point, she should have been told that she didn't have to testify in the inquest. And because she wasn't told that, all that information the jury never heard. So it appears that this was a planned thing. It was important for the mother to die before the father, because there is evidence that Lizzie and her sister Emma were upset that some of the father's money was going to Abby's family, and they were afraid that if the father died before the mother, that the mother would get the stepmother would get all the money, and they may lose out. So that's one of the reasons why Abby would have been killed before the father. But whoever did Abby, that same rage, you know, they said, well, how can you keep that rage for an hour and a half? Well, what's the rage there in the first place? It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. You know? One other thing that we have to also not forget, that Lizzie said that her mother got a note about somebody sick and that she went to help that sick person. Well, no, they actually put an article in the newspaper asking whoever this person might have been that brought a note to Mrs. Borden to tell her to go visit a sick person, can you please step forward and let us know? No one ever showed up. Yeah, she also said that she was in the dining room ironing around 9:15 when Mrs. Borden would have been killed and fell to the floor. Now, I grew up in a Victorian home in New England. I know how they built. In fact, I lived downstairs from where my grandmother used to live. I knew where my grandmother was at all times. Every step she took, we could hear downstairs. I mean, that was the construction back then. Now, we actually did a test when we did the documentary. We actually took a chest which weighed the same amount that Mrs. Borden did at the time, and we took a decibel counter to see, you know, how significant the sound was downstairs where Lizzie said she was. And I forget the actual number, but it was significant. There's no way that that Lizzie wouldn't have heard somebody fall to the bedroom floor, because the bedroom is basically right above the dining room area.
So you did a luminol test when you were there, when you visited the location. You found something interesting, right? What did you find?
Yeah, well, we were in the basement, and you know, we were at the area where the ash box was, where they found the hatchet head and some of the axes.
Right.
And so I just sprayed the luminol in that particular area, and there's a Susan, you probably see this. It's probably still in the same place. There's a brick wall next to the box, and all of a sudden I got some significant reaction in certain portions of those bricks. I turned around and then I said, you know, that's right where the sofa was, where the father was killed. Just to try the luminol, because we never knew how long blood could be present and get a reaction. So I sprayed the ceiling in the basement right below where the sofa was with luminol, and I got a significant reaction coming through in between the pieces of the planks of the wood, and it appeared to me that certainly that would have been where blood would have been there for all that time. Now, whether that was a reaction for the blood or a reaction from something else that may have spilled there, don't know. But it was kind of interesting when we did that, because when you use luminol, you shut all the lights off and you spray it, and then if it reacts to biological fluids, you get this significant glowing, and we certainly got that day. But even if it was, I mean, it wasn't going to prove anything. It wasn't going to prove anything, you know.
Right. So do you think that luminol could actually pick up traces of, like, you know, like you said, biological matter, like 120, 30 years later?
Well, we didn't know, because we know. I mean, I talked to the company that I bought the luminol from and said, hey, you know, how old, how many years can we get a reaction? They said, well, we don't really know, because normally when you work a case, it's only within hours or a couple of days or a month or so, you know. So I called them up and said, hey, I got a reaction. I don't know what it was, but it certainly was a reaction where blood would have been. And
so you had your hands on the evidence.
We were at the Historical Society, where all the evidence is, and they brought one piece in at a time, and we had white gloves on, myself and Tom Lang, who is the O.J. Simpson and principal investigator. He and I worked this documentary together. Anyways, they brought the bedspread that was on the bed where Abby was killed, and you could see blood spatter on the bedspread. It was all folded. So nobody told me I couldn't unfold it, so I unfolded it and found, I don't know what you call it. My wife told me to call it a mantilla. It's kind of like a hanky that they would put on their head and they would tie it underneath. Women used to wear it a lot back then. Anyways, there was this mantilla that nobody knew even existed inside there. Everybody at the Historical Society was kind of shocked because they didn't know it was in there. So anyways, we opened that up very carefully, and it was very frail and breaking down. The material was breaking down, but there was this hole, like a split, like a cut, and at the same time I had the hatchet head in my hand. So while the camera was rolling and Tom and I were talking, I just kind of slipped it into that hole, and it fit perfectly in the hole, which meant nothing. Of course, the production company said, Tom Moriello found a fact that must have been the hatchet head, which was crazy. What we wanted to do with the hatchet head to see whether it was or was not the murder weapon, we wanted to exhume the bodies, or at least exhume the heads, and do a tool mark test to determine whether that hatchet head was in fact the murder weapon. But the town of Fall River refused to allow that to happen. And again,
well,
was
they're
actually
tired
on
of
display.
exhuming those heads and burying them back. You know, it's crazy.
Okay, wait a
Because
minute.
they're apparently, they took the heads off and they're buried 2 feet above the bodies in the cemetery now.
Yeah, I heard that. That was the first I heard that. I knew they were buried. I didn't know. I thought they were buried back into the coffin, but maybe that's right. I don't know. But they were definitely buried, and we wanted to dig them up and then do tool mark tests to see whether that hatchet head, which was broken right at the base of the actual hatchet for some reason, and see if we could prove it. I don't believe that they had tool mark examination back in 1892 to see that. So the idea was, okay, if we proved that hatchet head was in fact a murder weapon, does that prove that Lizzie Borden killed her stepmother and father? Not necessarily, but who would have committed the crime and then went downstairs and hid it in a box of ash? So.
Right. Yeah. If you're an attacker from the outside, why would you have done that? There was some evidence that you wanted to get your hands on and you could not. Tell us about that.
During our investigation, Morningstar Entertainment, who was the production company, they found out that all the letters that Lizzie was sending for that almost a year that she was in jail, she was sending letters to her lawyer back and forth, etc., that those letters still exist in the law firm that still exists. Of course, the people don't exist, but the law firm does. And we were trying to get access to those letters to see what they said, and they said they couldn't, because of, the legal ramifications. But we said, hey, everybody's dead that would have a concern or a problem. And so allegedly there's a bunch of letters locked up in a safe in a law firm somewhere in Massachusetts, I don't know exactly where it was, that really could possibly tell us something about what Lizzie was thinking and what she was talking to her lawyer about. There was something going on with her and her father. The father's for like 15 years was wearing her high school class ring. She didn't even graduate from high school, okay? But he's wearing her high school ring. What's Lizzie's middle name? Andrew. Why is that?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of speculation that part of the reason why the Borden family was so closed-minded and didn't share a lot of things, and all the doors were always locked, because there were things going on in the house that they didn't want to get out.
This was one of the most sensationalized cases in American history.
one that generated front page news and headlines across the country. The key to the prosecution case was that the interval between the murders meant that it really could not have been an outside assailant. If convicted, the only penalty for murder was death.